Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you are doing well. And today we have to talk about a very important trend in popular music and in metal music. That is the band Sleep Token. Their recent LP I reviewed over on the main YouTube channel. Didn't enjoy it. There were a lot of people in the comments that sort of felt the similar way. There were people in the comments who disagreed with me vehemently, and it would seem that there are a lot of people who, despite my distaste, the distaste of many, there are people enjoying the record, enjoying the heck out of the record, enough to stream it so much that it has gone number one on the charts. And I just wanted to dig into what this means for Sleep Token, for metal music generally, with music writer Eli Ennis, who I've had on this channel before, talking about Sleep Token, talking about modern trends in metal, specifically when it comes to, fusions with pop and so on and so forth. So I figured what better time than now to have Eli on again to basically discuss this trend sort of further progressing, and I guess even in a way growing. Eli, as somebody who's also reviewed this new record too, because you wrote a review for Pitchfork for it, and have obviously been watching the progression of all of this. Sleep Token going number one with this album, is this a sign of something? Is this a fluke? Did they land this spot merely because there wasn't enough out there to sort of have competition with it for that spot? Or is this a sign of this type of metal, this pop R&B fusion Gent Frankenstein monster that we're sort of seeing pop up more and more? Is it really rising to a high station of cultural prominence now?
I think it's undoubtedly is extremely popular. Like Ghost went to number one about a month before with a similar, not similar, but it was a pop metal fusion. That was kind of a big deal for them. Sleep Token obviously have a crazy amount of fans, and this type of music, I guess, is, the numbers show it's extremely popular at the moment. What does that say about metal and things like that? I mean, you and I were not into the record. I think it's more symbolic of sort of the enshittification of metalcore on a mass scale than anything else. Because if you're going to take Sleep Token as a band that came from metalcore and then use that as a jumping off point to explore where they are at now, which is, I think, the most interesting thing about this is the fact that they were a straight metalcore gent band that played very heavy abrasive music at one point and is now the number one record in the world, basically. That is, I guess, what's kind of interesting, but how they got there, I think, is very crucial to understanding why this maybe isn't such an amazing or intriguing or really even that historically anomalous feat as some people say it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, what sort of trends or past, I guess, waves, be it decades ago or even recently in metal music, have you seen, or are you sort of comparing or drawing parallels to that? You're seeing this and you're like, this is not really a big deal, I guess.
I mean, there's been if you, I'm not going to count 80s hair metal, I guess, but you could. There's been metal records that have gone to number one for decades, whether it was Metallica, Korn in the 90s, and Tool, and Disturbed, Linkin Park in the 2000s. Basically the same bands in the 2010s. There wasn't really much new blood reaching that level of popularity. So you had Slipknot going to number one, Tool going to number one, Disturbed sort of reliably being the few bands that could achieve that marker. And you had bands coming close to that, like Bring Me the Horizon went to number two with their 2015 album That's the Spirit, which was not a metal album at all. That was kind of their pivot away from metal, but a pretty impressive feat. They never went number one though, and their record from last year didn't even get close. So but again, I'm not looking at Sleep Token as a standard metalcore band. I'm looking at them as what they sound like now, which is a massive pop rock group with some metal elements. 3 Days Grace and Stained and bands of that ilk, Linkin Park, Evanescence, big pop rock, heavy rock acts with some metal accoutrements have gone to number one before. Those bands sound different than Sleep Token, but the amount of metal in their sound is comparable, I feel like. So I don't know. It's not like shocking to me that like a very glitzy, glammy pop rock album went to number one.
Mm.
It's interesting that there's like straight up a couple Gent breakdowns on it and like screams occasionally. Like that is genuinely unprecedented, but you know, the majority of this record is not a metal album. So a pop rock record going to number one, a record that's even more poppy and glitzy and sort of manicured than a Disturbed album. Is that shocking? I don't know. Not to me, I guess.
You know, you've kind of gone over with a fine-toothed comb the latest record, the one before that, which I also reviewed. In your estimation there, with the very intense success of the new record over here, would you attribute that at all to Sleep Token going even more pop on this new record? Like from, you know, what you can recollect and what you observe, like, do you feel like the mix, the ratio of pop influences to gent and metalcore influences and so on and so forth, like, is that mix on this latest record roughly the same as it was on their previous one, or have they even headed into more sort of like accessible territory on this most recent record?
It's definitely more accessible. There's very little metal on this album. I mean, there's some, and that's like, again, that's just me. That's just objective fact. Like, there's just not that much metal. There's entire songs that have like very little guitars on it. It's more like pop in the vein of The Weeknd or older Drake is what I kind of compared some of these to in terms of the rap influence coming in. Like, whereas the last record, Taken Back to Eden, was like a relatively even split, I guess, between like sort of the weepy piano balladry pop and metalcore. There's even less on this. So yeah, of course, like it's more appealing. It's an easier entry point for people who don't listen to metal to get into this band. And Sleep Token going to number one does not mean like Meshuggah's going viral on TikTok right now. Having like a Kate Bush type moment, you know, like actual like full bore like gent music. I think you could argue maybe it's more popular than ever, but like it's not more popular because those sounds are suddenly more appealing. It's more popular because they're being laundered into genuine pop music.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is a point there. Like in the late 2010s, early 2020s, like gent has most definitely been like having a moment for sure commercially, especially as like, you know, some of the newer bands have kind of brought together with it some clean lead vocals and more progressive rock elements and progressive metal elements here and there. But in the case of Sleep Token, it does not seem that what few gent influences that band currently on their latest record exemplifies. I mean, usually when a band in that lane gets really popular, it does tend to, in a way, I think in a healthy sort of like culture, have a bit of a trickle down effect to the other bands in the scene doing something similarly, or the bands that kind of like were pioneers for that sound to the point that you were just making. But in the case of Sleep Token with this newest record, that doesn't seem to be kind of the case. I don't think this album is kind of like, you know, creating a broader sort of interest in like, oh, like is there other metal with these kinds of guitars? Like that doesn't seem to be the case.
No. And yeah, I mean, and even if you look at it in good faith and say that there will be some amount of people who listen to Sleep Token and use that as their gateway into listening to more underground metal, which I guess is fine.
I mean, it could happen.
I mean, I think it definitely will, but like, will it be a meaningful number of people, or like, does that justify celebrating Sleep Token's number one? I think that's like some of the issue I have with the discourse is people are like, well, this is a big deal for our scene. Like, you should just be happy that a band from this scene, metalcore or whatever, got to this level. It's like, well, why do I have to be happy that a band had to reduce their sound to like extremely bad music, in my opinion, and scrub every element of what makes the scene, like every like quality of what scene metalcore is in order to achieve that? Like, they had to debase themselves to get there. Like, that's not that cool to me. You know?
No, I see your point there. You know, from what you've been able to observe with like, you know, more years to kind of like watch Sleep Token reach this point, what in your view is exactly sort of like the Sleep Token audience right now? Like who is the Sleep Token stan? What is like the key demographic that this band is appealing to that they seemingly just like have on lock in the way that they do? Is it like newer fans? Is it older fans? There's even somebody in chat sort of theorizing that it's like, a bunch of like older listeners who are kind of like nostalgic for something from an older time period. But, simultaneously, with some of the comparisons that you were making earlier, like to other metal groups and artists who have had like these kind of crossover moments on the charts and a bit of pop appeal to what they do. Even some of the more accessible ones, like Linkin Park, for example, I'm sure there are a lot of maybe even old school Linkin Park fans who would see that comparison and be like, what?
Yeah.
Linkin Park is nothing like Sleep Token. They're so much better for this reason, that reason. They're so much more artistic, da da da. And obviously that can be debated, but I think there's a lot of metal fans who would be incensed by that comparison, in a way. But again, in your view, who is Sleep Token really resonating with? Is it metal fans? Is it pop fans? Is it older listeners? Is it newer listeners?
I mean, anecdotally speaking, I know old school metalheads who like straight up listen to death metal, who for some reason are really into Sleep Token and find them very exciting. I have friends who don't listen to metal at all, really, who love Sleep Token. And I know people who've been into metalcore since the 2010s or whatever earlier, who Sleep Token has kind of regenerated their interest in that genre. So I think they really do have a broad appeal. And I think what's crucial about Sleep Token, and when I think about this, is what I've come to think that like you can kind of project whatever you want onto them. Like if you want them to be, if you're a fan who isn't as familiar with metal, they're a really easy gateway band. I'm not saying that derogatively. They just are. They're an accessible group. You can appreciate them in that sense. If you want to be a fan of an artist that has this sort of mystique, this concept, these theatrics to them, and you're interested in that element of the art, like you can get lost in their lore or whatever and appreciate them for their visuals and sort of the themes of their music. And they have that thing. And then like, if you, I don't agree that they're very good at doing this, but like if you are into like this sort of post metal, sort of progginess of their music, and that's a style of music that you appreciate, like you can appreciate them in like this technical way. Like a lot of people talk about Sleep Token as like they blend so many styles, like they're virtuosos, they could do a million things at once. And like I think they do a very poor job at all of those things. But like if you are someone who's into like proggy style metal, proggy rock, I guess you can appreciate them on that front. So I think they're kind of like make of them what you will type band. Like you can enter them from a number of vantage points and like find something to like if you like their music, if you know what I mean.
Is there even an argument for the case that there are metal fans who are drawn to them, and because maybe they're sort of devout metal fans and sort of identify strictly as metal fans, maybe they're not digesting or sort of exposing themselves voluntarily to a lot of pop music, and Sleep Token becomes that gateway for them to do so because they're like, oh, well, this is like, it's pop music, but it's at least metal coded enough to where it's sort of like, vibes with other things that I'm listening to because it's got kind of that metal veneer to it in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you listen to metalcore and you listen to metal, you probably don't listen to a lot of pop music. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. It was truer when I was a kid. Like if you like metalcore, you were kind of against the mainstream,
Right. That's exactly the thing. I feel like there are sort of less cultural barriers in that way these days. Certainly like I feel like those stringent kind of like musical consumption lines that were there when I was in high school are not there to the degree that they were like decades ago. So, in my mind, a lot of the time when I hear this stuff, I'm just thinking, I mean, I sort of see the pop itch it's scratching, but like, why not just listen to pop?
Yeah.
That's what I do. When I want to hear a pop song, I'll just listen to pop. I'll just listen to a great pop artist. I won't listen to a metal band parading around as a pop band. I'll just listen to, and when I want to listen to metal, I'll just listen to metal. I won't listen to a pop artist pretend to be like, do their worst like metal impression on a song or whatever. I'll just listen to a metal song. Speak to that point if you will.
I mean, I completely agree. I love pop music. I love rap music. You can't have a true understanding and appreciation for rap music, especially modern rap music, and think that the rapping on the Sleep Token record is well done. Like You probably don't listen to
You
that much
can't? Really?
rap.
Truly?
It's a decree I'm enforcing a decree right now. Like, you
Okay.
can't. No, I mean, I don't. Here's the thing. Like, kind of a point I made in the article last year, and I remember we talked about it a little bit on the stream last year, and people had some criticisms. I'm not against the idea. I'm not some sort of like genre purist. Like, I love 100 gecs. Okay, like, come on.
Right.
I'm not against the idea of there being a metal band that incorporates pop or rap elements if it's done well.
Right.
It's very difficult to do well.
It's about doing it well. It's not about I feel the same way that you do along these lines. It's not about these genres can't mix. You know, we're not anti-genre mixing. It just has to be done well, and it's very difficult to do well. Like the amount of artists who fuse wildly different genres, together, and they have both not only mainstream success but also critical acclaim. You know, that's kind of a rarity. You know, that truly is kind of a rarity. I mean, usually when that does happen and it does hit some kind of like mainstream appeal, it's usually because you're getting an artist who is fusing together a few unlikely genres in a way where it's almost like a novelty. And there's a lot of listeners who are attracted to it. It's like, oh, this is kind of a crazy, silly thing. Haven't quite heard country and rap together before or something, you know? So it's either pulled off that way, or, you know, you're talking about artists who are like pulling together the most obvious, agreeable, surface level elements of each of these genres, because, you know, the deeper you go into the more left field and obscure and sort of maybe more like true head aesthetics of like, you know, death metal or reggaeton or, hardcore hip hop and so on and so forth. Like the deeper you go into kind of the specific characteristics that make all of those things what they are, and you try to pull from all those things, the harder it becomes to make them all work together as a cohesive thing, because all of these styles have vastly different characteristics. And the reason that they are the way that they are, and the reason that these genres are special, is because they're so different from these other genres. You know, having to adopt elements and ideas from other genres can be really hard to pull off, you know, not only in terms of like, you know, doing it tastefully, but just doing it well.
I would say it's harder to write a good pop song than it is to write a good metal song, or a good, like, you can make a heavy sounding metal song. I mean, there's a gazillion metal bands that have done it. Not saying that it's easy to write a good metal song, but like writing a great pop hook is really difficult, like genuinely. So like, I wouldn't expect a metal band to be able to be that, you know, to have that much agility in that field. That said, I do think that there's contemporaries of Sleep Token. I'm not like a huge fan of Bad Omens by any means, but like they've written a few genuinely really good pop metal songs. I think Noah from that band knows how to write a pop hook and knows how to at least like blend contemporary metalcore and melodic rock in a way that feels a little more tasteful and a little more cohesive than with Sleep Token. And I'd say the same for Bring Me the Horizon. Whereas just Sleep Token, I just think do a really piss poor job at incorporating pop. It's just very grating to me. So yeah, it's all about the way that they execute it, not the fact that they're attempting to do what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would also echo what you're saying there, and also throw in a band like Spirit Box, for example. Like, you know, I can see what they're doing. Yeah. Is it my favorite style of metal? No. And are there some songs that they've written where I do think, like, from just a pop chorus standpoint, are they very well written? Yeah. You know, I mean, if I'm to sort of like look at just a glance of like the musical and melodic quality of, some of the best songs from, again, Spirit Box, and sort of compare that to Sleep Token, I feel like, in my opinion, I think Spirit Box has a greater appreciation of pop music than even Sleep Token does. I feel like Sleep Token is functioning off, again, just a very surface level appreciation and understanding of all of these genres. I don't really hear, and maybe there is, maybe it's there and it's just not showing up in the music itself. But personally, when compared to other groups out there, I don't hear a whole lot of virtuosity. You know, I don't hear like, you know, what you're saying some people claim there to be. Just like, oh man, they're so like unbelievably immensely talented, and that's why they can do everything. I mean, I feel like these days, especially with like how easy it is to sort of consume just about anything that you want to, like, and you know, all the production tips and tricks and you know, tutorials out there to sort of do this or that or do this other thing, like you could glean pretty quickly just the basic, very simplistic ways of kind of adopting or parroting just about any sound. You know, go on YouTube, trap instrumental immediately. Like, you know, you could, if you're a decent producer who's been like working in a DAW pretty consistently for a year, you could put down a basic trap beat in about 30 minutes to an hour with like, you know, little to no understanding of what makes the genre work. And then you can fuse that with a baseline understanding of several other things that you barely know anything about. And it sort of becomes its own sort of thing, I guess, once you've fused it with enough things that nobody else is thinking to fuse it with.
Yeah, and there definitely seems to be a trend towards, not that this is, again, like Mr. Bungle was doing that in the 90s, but like I think of an artist like Kim Dracula, who is like, their music is just like mixing a zillion different things together. And like, it's like, oh, the fact they're blending all of these things is what makes it interesting. And to be fair, they have a lot of charisma. And I think it's not for me, but like, I kind of can appreciate what Kim Dracula is doing. But Sleep Token,
or even like a band like Ween.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, part of like what makes those bands so entertaining is like every single song, it does sound like, wow, this sounds like this could come from an artist who has spent their whole lives, you know, trying to understand, like playing this genre, you know. Whereas I mean, you know, that's I guess the point that I would make there.
And just to put a pin on it too, with Spirit Box, like Spirit Box Gent riff too. They know how to write interesting breakdowns. Whether it's the new record, you go back in their catalog, they have heavy songs that sound good as heavy Gent songs. Sleep Token's Gent elements, especially on this new record, are so simplistic and so generic. Like anyone who spent any time listening to other types of Gent can pick out that like what they're doing is they're not innovating. The metal parts of this record are not being innovated upon in the same way that the pop and the rap elements feel so pedestrian too. Like again, it's just surface level, you know, sort of plucking of 17 things and putting them together does not make something that's spectacular.
But didn't you hear the last song on the album where it gets really loud at that one part?
It gets really loud, you know?
It gets really loud at that one part.
There's a breakdown, yeah.
That makes it extra metal.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You know, here's a good question that somebody asked in chat, and maybe this is sort of like, you know, being avoided because the band does tend to sort of like be so mysterious. Like at this point, does Sleep Token, do you think, or have they even sort of like confirmed, do they even consider themselves to be metal or a metal band, or does such a categorization even matter to them at this point?
This is such an irksome part of the discourse, in my opinion. They did one interview in 2018, I believe. And in it, Vessel, the singer, was like, don't get caught up on genres. We're not about genre, you know, we're a genre, essentially. He was saying like they're beyond genres, what they're trying to do, which that's a whole other stream to talk about. The way artists talk about being beyond genre in the 2020s is kind of a cop-out way of saying like, I'm not doing anything particularly well. But no, I mean, I don't know what they consider themselves, but I'll look at them, and with my review, I made a point to look at them from two perspectives. I looked at them as a metal band and judged them based on being a metal band. Didn't think they were very good at that. And then I took the record in as a pop record or as a melodic rock record. And it doesn't really matter which way you cut it. Like, I don't think like however you choose to define them, like, doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the fact that they're not a good band, like, in my opinion. Like, and I just feel like people getting caught up, like there's so many comments who are just like, if you're listening to them as a metal band and you're judging them as a metal band, you're missing the point. It's like, well, okay, then I'll judge them as a pop band, and they're not doing a very good job at that too. And I think that also speaks to like, yeah, I don't know why some of this like falls flat with me in terms of the number one being so important. It's like, well, yeah, pop record going to number one that's not that exciting. So why are you telling me to be like overjoyed about Sleep Token's success. If
Yeah, when you do look at it as a pop record, it doesn't seem like that exciting of an event, for a pop record to go number one. Um, another thing I wanted to ask you about your view on, and I know I didn't dig into this that much in my review, but look, there's part of me that hears the band's music, sort of hears how it's working aesthetically, and also sees how well the band is doing on platforms like Spotify. And, I feel like as far as like what Spotify does, how they try to serve their users, if I can stretch the word of that term, I think more sort of like, just kind of lull them more than serve them, but still with playlists just like full of tracks that all sound like uniformly the same, just sort of like lock people into sort of like longer background listening as opposed to like, engage listening, the way that they pack so many playlists and recommendations in their algorithm with like bad AI music and so on and so forth. Like the Sleep Token for me as a band like makes sense on a platform that sort of like, makes a great deal of money kind of treating the art of music in that way. So I think on some level it is kind of like easy to discount the band as being like, oh, people are just like kind of vibing with it and enjoying it because it like works as good background music or something. But like simultaneously, there seemingly is like that very significant constant lore element of the band that at least some fans are like very passionate about and very into and sort of seem to get a lot out of in terms of like Sleep Token's appeal. And I wanted to know in your own view, like how exactly do you feel like the lore works? Is there really any, in your view, like real depth or significance to the lore? Does it contribute to the band's music in a positive way? Does it, is it actually all that meaningful? And, is at least the lore done well, if not the music?
uh I mean, I don't know. It's hard. It's one of those things that feels they present it as being a lot deeper than I think it actually is. It feels a little fake deep to me, the lore. On previous records, it was this sort of this battle between, from as far as I understand it, Vessel and the deity Sleep, who was maybe Sleep is Vessel's lover, maybe it's his like sort of abusive nemesis, kind of shifts around. Maybe it's all a metaphor for the stuff that Vessel, the human being under the mask, is going through in real life. But it was all left vague enough for you to kind of project whatever you want onto it. I think that's what's crucial about the lore, is that you can kind of see it however you want, and you can kind of, project whatever you're feeling or however you want to take it. On the new record, what I thought they did that was it's kind of interesting in concept was try to peel that back, and Vessel was kind of on a couple songs breaking the fourth wall a little bit and talking about the fact that hiding under a mask hasn't served him well. Like people are still like trying to dox him, and like fans are trying to not take, trying to crack through the lore and still want to have this parasocial relationship with him. And he was kind of speaking to that, but I don't like reading the lyrics on these records. Like, did not leave a particularly good taste in my mouth. I don't think he's a particularly sophisticated lyricist. I don't know, like that, like the lore of a metal band is, personally, I'm not that interested in that sort of thing in general. So I'm like not going to pretend that like I'm invested in the lore in any real artist that I can think of. But like, I don't know, it all feels a little silly, a little childish to me, the way that Sleep Token goes about it. And especially the fact that like the lore feels so pretentious, and sort of their whole aesthetic feels like it has this sort of air of sophistication. There's no levity in the music at all. It's all so like heavy-handed. But then you listen to the music and it's just so profoundly corny. Like that dissonance to me just kind of undermines the lore. Like whatever sophistication there might be in there, if you really spend the time to dig through it, it's undermined by the sound of the music. It's undermined by occasional lyrical blunders, like not occasional, frequent lyrical blunders that Vessel has in the lyrics. Like it's hard for me to take it seriously when taking Sleep Token seriously at all just feels ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I think air of sophistication is probably like the best way that you could you could put it. There's something with the mask and the presentation and sort of like the album art and so on and so forth that just sort of seems like very kind of cold and very stern and very serious. And it's like what we're doing here is like addressing something that's really deep and really grave. But simultaneously, there is like enough of a lack of specificity there to where you can kind of like, it's a bit of a Rorschach test. You can kind of read what you want into it. Maybe not all the way, but to a very great degree. Whereas like, a comparison of another band that historically has been very heavy on the lore is like Ghost, whose lore is like very specific, not, so much so that like when I look at it, I don't see myself in it. It sort of seems like this crazy, mystical, made up, zany religious satire, that obviously I have feelings on and I have my own reads on, but I don't read into it as like, oh, this is like a thing that I went through, it's,
Yeah.
I'm not looking at it like that. And I'm looking for ways to project myself into it. It just sort of seems like a fantastical experience that I'm kind of viewing from the outside that's trying to make its own point. Given whatever album cycle it's in. So, I mean, just to be specific or kind of be pointed about it, and I know Eli are not necessarily inherently against lore. There's nothing wrong or bad about a band having lore or an album cycle having some lore behind it. But we have to kind of ask ourselves, like, what is the lore actually saying? What is the purpose of the lore? Is it actually clearly communicating an idea and going for something? Or is it just like kind of presenting the audience with this vague sense of like, oh, there's actually like more layers to this than you're realizing when you just listen to it on the surface, which like, I don't know, in a way, I think could kind of contribute to what you were describing there earlier. I feel like if Sleep Token kind of just presented themselves as like, yeah, we're just like a regular gent pop band who's just going to write some hits. Maybe there'll be a little R&B. Who cares? I think generally there'd probably be like less reason to obsess over whose vessel, who is he? I need to know who this man is. I need to understand everything that's going on. Like, what's the fucking Da Vinci Code of this record? Like, in a way, when you're presenting the band and the music in the way that you are, at least in some people, and I don't, encourage anybody to harass anybody or sort of, go ahead and try to find out people's personal information. Obviously, that's creepy in all contexts. But like, some people are going to respond to such a thing, thinking like, oh, there's something like really to this and I have to dig and I have to like find out, or else like, this thing that I'm enjoying and this thing that I'm obsessed with doesn't have any meaning. I need to know what the deeper sort of thoughts are behind this, or else like, my passion or my interest in this is for nothing.
There's another motif that I was picking up on this record, which is like this sort of identity crisis. Like the first song has this sort of line about halt this eclipse in me, and there's this sort of like darkness filling Vessel's soul or whatever. I don't know, but I just find it very difficult.
You've never had darkness fill your soul?
Oh, I have darkness in my soul, but I find it difficult to like be interested or sympathize or whatever, feel any sort of emotion towards someone's identity crisis if they literally don't have an identity. This is an anonymous man who we don't know anything about. It's like whatever sort of personal revelations he kind of dribbles into this record, like they just feel very shallow to me because you don't know anything about him. Like, and therefore it just all feels so anonymous. And so like, it's very hard for me to feel invested in someone's personal drama if I basically know them as well as I would know like a Verizon wireless chat bot or something, where it's just sort of this like masked entity that I don't know anything about because he doesn't speak to the public. And I'm supposed to feel something about his, sort of romantic tribulations or his identity crisis tribulations. I mean, it's just like, what buy-in is there to that? And just to go back to what you said about Ghost, very crucial about their sort of lore is that it's a satire. There's levity to it. It's funny. It's fun. It's campy. There's none of that in Sleep Token. It's all so serious. It's all like, this is like a just rain pouring down drama at all times. And like, is that what pop music is? Like, is that what metal music is? Like, not for me. Like, I don't think, unless you're talking about a black metal record, like I don't need my metal to be this dreary if it's also going to be this melodic. I mean, everything about it just clashes is what I'm saying. Like, Oh, it's goofy.
No, to your point that you were just saying, like, we don't know enough about him personally to like for anything that he's going through on a personal level, like to really matter. But simultaneously, he's not really giving us an understanding on that level or on the level of like a character in place of who he actually is, which I
Yeah.
feel like is also an option too. You know, take for example, someone like The Weeknd. I mean, you know, there could be a lot of discussion over like how much of the content of Abel's music is like actually him and his own real life experience, and how much of it is him sort of like building up The Weeknd as like a character of this guy who does all these drugs and has these kind of toxic relationships and so on and so forth. Like, regardless of how much of it is real or fake, like we have a vague idea in our heads of like who the person is, who this is all happening to, what sort of experiences he tends to engage in, what he stands for. Like we understand the character archetype going into these albums, or even going into his awful new movie when we engage with those things. So we understand who this is happening to, why it's happening to them, and what the character's tendencies are. Like, you know, whether it be on a personal level or through some kind of representation of a person, we don't know anything about what the hell Vessel is.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, why do any of these feelings like really matter, and what context do any of them fit?
Yeah. And I would say the same about like Lana Del Rey or something, who's this sort of like quasi mythological figure in her music, but like is still like very easy to relate to and understand. It writes great pop songs. Like it just, again, like people who
I
actually
feel like we
understand
know
the
a lot
genre.
about Lana, though. I feel like we know.
We do.
I feel
That's
like we
fair.
know a lot about the Lana archetype at
But
this
she's
point.
still playing it up in her music, is what I mean. Like,
No, for sure.
um, but yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, comparing this to like the band's last album cycle, because I know you wanted to get into this a little bit, where I think Sleep Token stood out as maybe being like a little bit more singular in terms of like where they stood in the metal landscape and the pop landscape. Are you now seeing with this new album doing as well as it has, and Sleep Token continually being like this, success in rock music and in mainstream music? Are you seeing more artists and groups and songs kind of like cropping up that you feel like are adopting this similar sound vibe? Is it kind of like growing into an actual like, you know, measurable trend?
I'd say yeah. I'd say that there's contemporaries of Sleep Token who aren't quite as big, who are doing a similar style of music and have like genuine fan bases behind them. It seems like there's genuine buzz behind a band like Loathe,
Mm.
who UK metalcore band who came up alongside Sleep Token, have collaborated with Sleep Token, are just put out a new song that has this sort of like 7 different motifs within one song. In my opinion, they're not very coherent. It's got this sort of like serious post metal, kind of alternative metal, Deftonesy vibe to it. And
The Deftones vibes are big right now.
yeah, for sure. Obviously, Deftones are huge. So I think sonically, like, yeah, there's a lot. Like, I'm just thinking about a lot of like the very popular metal bands, I guess, of the last couple years, and it seems to be bands that are really just like stitching a bunch of unlike sounds together. Whether it's Sleep Token, whether it's Loathe, whether it's Falling in Reverse. For like, you know, like that band like meshes a bunch of different styles together. Uh, you know, that's sort of like quick cutting and pasting. Bring Me the Horizon too, of course. It's just sort of like eclectic for the sake of being eclectic. Seems to be popular right now, but also this sort of theatrical presentation, I think, is really popular right now in metal. I went into this in my article on metal last year. And it's even more true now, more so true now, I think, with that band President that just kind of launched last week, which is this other sort of post metalcore band that is doing this, you know, kind of ridiculous theatrics where they're treating the band like a presidential campaign. I mean, one of their Instagram captions was like, the presidential campaign notice, president will stage their first headlining rally at so and so time, like, which is exactly the sort of like third person bulletin style announcements that Sleep Token do on their Instagram. And it all goes back to Ghost, because that's what Ghost has been doing for like 10 years now.
Right.
And this president single it doesn't sound exactly like Sleep Token by any means, but it fits very cleanly into that sort of uh, stream of music alongside Loathe, where it's this like sort of pretty Deftonesy, ethereal metal verses and crushing, genty breakdowns that still feels, nothing about it really feels particularly abrasive. It has this sort of like patina of popness to it.
I also saw in like a few clips with that president band there was like a mask involved in and everything. Is this band also kind of like running the anonymous play too a little bit, or is that just like a theatrical thing?
Yeah, they were anonymous for like a few weeks or whatever. They were like teasing the band for a while, and I don't have the guy's name handy, but he's kind of a veteran of the UK music scene, the main songwriter. But yeah, they're trying to play up the anonymous thing. The dude's wearing a mask that looks straight up like one of the ghost masks uh, from however many papas ago or whatever. It just feels like, really, we're doing this again. Like I guess I'm just kind of surprised there's that much of an appetite. Like all these new metal bands have to have this sort of like built-in, lore to them, or this like really over the top presentation in order to hook people in. Like it's not just about, not that like there hasn't been concepts to metal bands since the beginning of metal, of course, but like I don't know, it just feels like there's so much more intention put into it now, and it just feels very like content creation-y to me, and just sort of like forced, I guess.
I guess that's kind of like an interesting, maybe one of the final topics that we can get into here. Like, to what do you feel like that can sort of be attributed? As you said, like, metal is a genre where there's been a lot of artists that have engaged in theatrics, have worn masks, have, had other things kind of going on outside of the music to kind of like add an extra element of drama or maybe even like visuals to what they do. But like, this time around in this era, it does feel maybe a little less inspired by that and a little more inspired by like, the weird ways in which content creators find ways to keep their audiences engaged on social media, or something like that. Combine that with like the pop elements and all the different kind of zany genre fusions where you have to cut in all this different stuff to kind of keep people engaged. Like, is this a sign of needing to do this because people's attention spans are so shit? Is it a matter of bands or artists realizing like, I'm a metal artist, but like maybe people don't even really like metal that much, so I have to throw in all this extra stuff to get people who are maybe not that into the genre to sort of like step in through the threshold and kind of listen to something that at least in name is kind of like a metal band still?
I think it's that. I think it's also just difficult to break through the noise right now and make a name for yourself as a musician online. So like, I understand, I guess, the impulse to want to have something more than just music to present. And I think this sort of stuff plays well with the visuals on social media, this sort of cryptic, music video clips you can post teasing something for weeks at a time that have this sort of like, oh, what's the story behind this? I don't know. Like it all just plays well to how you present to bands that, their career is basically marketing themselves online, is what a modern band has to do. So I understand, like, looking from like a cynical business standpoint, like this is a useful way to, I guess, market your art. And like you said, get people invested in it beyond just the sound. It's like, oh, what's this mysterious figure? Like there's I guess potential for more buy-in in that regard. But I guess just to also bring up something that I wanted to emphasize is like in terms of like the genre mixing and sort of like, oh, we need to include other elements because people don't like metal that much. Maybe there's some validity to that, but like, I'm not going to pretend like the metalcore that I came up with in high school in the early 2010s wasn't also crudely mashing together a bunch of unlike genres. I mean, bands like Attack Attack, Acid Alexandria, Day to Remember, Acid Alexandria were dropping trance bass drops in the middle of their metalcore, 15 years ago.
Right.
What I think was different, though, I think what marks this sort of current iteration of metalcore and like makes it, an evolution, I guess, or maybe a de-evolution, in my opinion, like, is that it feels so like that stuff felt so silly and uninhibited almost. It almost felt like these were young kids just like throwing shit at the wall, seeing what stuck. Attack Attack didn't think that they were artistic visionaries when they put, a bass drop in their metalcore. They were kind of doing it for shits and giggles in a way. And like the fact,
No, they were doing it like knowing how outlandish of an idea that was.
yeah,
I mean, it even when I was when I recently had that Knocked Loose interview, the topic came up of like, yeah, some of the best stuff from this album that people love is just like us kind of dicking around in the studio and just being like, hey, can we do like a crazy reggaeton thing in the middle of this track? Like, rather than trying to find like the blandest, easiest way to kind of like make it all fit together, like let's do the craziest, most unexpected switch up that sounds ridiculous, like when we change into it, and sort of just see how that plays.
yeah. I think there's something to be said for approaching that in a way that just feels in service of having fun. I think that comes through. Experimentation, yeah. Whereas like Sleep Token doesn't feel like experimental. It feels very clinical to me. Like they're
clinical is a really great way to put it. I think clinical is a great word to put on it.
That's how I feel about them. Like, yeah, the experimentation doesn't feel loose and fun and off the cuff. It feels so intentional. And yeah, like it just feels very stuffy to me. And I feel that with a lot of these bands. Like there's just like not this sense of like thrill to the music. It all just feels so encumbered and burdened by this, this sort of drab coldness, as you said, or this sternness, this severeness that I just think pop, the melodic metalcore, does it need to be severe and stern? I don't think so. I don't think that's the central appeals to metalcore. I'm wrong. I could be. Clearly, I'm outnumbered because Sleep Token have the biggest album in the world right now.
But like, clearly, we're both outnumbered. But yeah. I mean, it is still worth like analyzing and asking questions about. Yeah, like does this type of music need to be as stern as the band is coming across much of the time in their promo material and everything like that? And not that I don't enjoy stern and super dark and super like, urgent or challenging metal music. I do, but usually when that is the case, like I guess there's a bit of a depth to that darkness, or at least like a bit of a point or a direction or a reference to like where that darkness or those feelings of darkness are coming from, what's inspiring them. Like, oh, we live in a world that makes me feel this way. Here are all the things about the world I exist in that are making me feel these feelings. Whereas I don't really get that from Sleep Token. It just sort of seems like this sort of performative, I guess, like presentation of these feelings that are disconnected from anything like actually material that you could point to. Be like, oh, this is why this is happening.
Yeah, a metal band should have the sound of the music should be congruent with the darkness. It shouldn't be darkness paired with a bad Ed Sheeran song. Like it's just like I can't take the darkness seriously if the darkness is hanging over that or some of these other like ridiculous rap flexes that he does on the record. It's just like it doesn't mesh.
Well, again, as staunch in our opinions as we are, clearly, just to explain it, clearly we're wrong. The band is popular, the band is successful. Sleep Token, #1, greatest metal band of the modern era. All I can do is hope that one day you and I get it, and,
That's true.
Maybe it'll happen with the next album. I guess we'll just have to see.
Numbers don't lie, right? Numbers don't lie.
It's absolutely true. Numbers do not lie. Well, Eli, thank you for coming on and talking to me about Sleep Token's #1, modern trends in metal, and everything else, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Fun as always.
No, fun as always. And I'm sure, when Sleep Token gets their next #1, we'll do it again.
Yeah, yearly basis now. Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you later, man.
All right. Take care.